Okay, so I'm sure you've all been watching those election results pretty closely, right? And like wondering, like, what could this new administration mean when it comes to immigration, right?
Right.
Yeah, so today we're diving into all of that. We're looking at a video analysis by this immigration lawyer, Julio Gennard, and he's sort of breaking down some potential changes we might see in, you know, immigration policy. And we're going to be taking a look at what went down during the last presidential term, the last time we had this administration in power, and thinking about what that might mean for the future.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot to cover.
It is.
But we'll break it down for you step by step.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, this is not about, us taking sides or anything.
Oh, no, not at all.
It's about understanding what might be coming down the pipeline and what that could mean for, folks who are immigrants or folks who are trying to immigrate. Just want to make sure everyone's prepared.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think being prepared and knowing what to expect is huge.
Yeah.
Especially in this kind of, climate where things could be shifting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Julio, he kind of lays out these 7 key areas where we might see some, some changes, some pretty big changes. And I guess we could just jump right into that.
Yeah, let's do it.
The first one is asylum and work permits. And this is one where things could get really tricky, especially for people seeking refuge in the U.S.
Yeah, this is a big one. He predicts that the Remain in Mexico program could come back.
Oh, gosh.
You remember that, right?
Vaguely. Remind me.
Yeah. So asylum seekers had to, wait in Mexico while their cases were being, processed in the U.S. courts.
Right. Yeah, I remember that being super controversial, like putting such a strain on people who were just trying to, escape difficult situations.
Huge burden. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really rough. And it sounds like not only could it come back, but it could, like, expand.
Yes. Potentially to other countries even. It wouldn't necessarily be limited to Mexico anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What?
And then on top of that, he's suggesting that actually getting asylum could become way tougher.
Oh, no.
And the wait time for work permits could just, like, skyrocket. He's saying maybe even a whole year.
A whole year. That just adds insult to injury,
It is. Absolutely.
Like, you're already fleeing your home country, trying to get somewhere safe, and then you have to wait a year to work? Like, legally work and support yourself? I mean, wow. That's a blow.
It is. And, it's not just the individual struggles. It's the economic side of it. Think about all the potential, all those contributions that people could be making if they were able to work.
Yeah.
And they're just stuck waiting.
Right. Okay. So asylum and work permits, definitely like a big, red flag there. Moving on to family-based green cards. Things could get a lot more complicated there, too, it seems.
Yeah. Julio thinks that we could see a return to a more difficult process and a more expensive process to get those green cards, especially for lower income families.
Okay.
And he even brings up the potential for Form I-944 to come back.
Wait, Form I-944, remind me what that's all about?
Oh, that one was it was a real pain. Basically, it was introduced during the last administration, and it added like tons and tons of requirements, asking for like a mountain of documentation. You had to prove that you could financially support yourself, that you wouldn't be a burden to the U.S. government.
Right.
All that stuff.
Okay. I vaguely remember the chaos that caused.
Yeah.
But like just the thought of having to dig up like old pay stubs or bank statements from years ago, like that's a nightmare.
It was a nightmare. It led to a ton of rejections.
I'll bet.
Even for like tiny little errors. And it just made the whole process so much harder, especially for, like you said, lower income families who maybe don't keep such detailed records.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that Form I-944 coming back, that's definitely something to watch out for.
Yeah, for sure, a red flag. Okay, so and then he warns about these major delays across the board.
Oh yeah.
So we're talking like green cards, visas, work permits, you name it. He's thinking a lot more interviews, like a lot more requests for documents, just generally more scrutiny overall.
Yeah. He's even calling it like a potential cultural shift within these, immigration agencies.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, it's not just about the policies themselves. It's like this change in attitude,
Yeah.
like a more like a more suspicious environment, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, like, even if even if like the written rules don't look that different,
Right.
that kind of like
Yeah.
shift in the way things are done could have a huge impact. Just like slowing things down, making it harder for people. It's like this underlying current that's affecting everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to what could happen at the border because things could get pretty hairy there too.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
First of all, he thinks Title 42 could make a comeback.
Oh, wow. Wait, for folks who need a reminder, like, what was Title 42 again?
Okay, so that was that controversial policy that they used during the pandemic,
Okay.
and it basically allowed them to just like rapidly expel people at the border
Oh, right.
without really going through
Oh,
the usual immigration process.
okay.
It's very controversial. A lot of people felt that it was used to deny people, the right to even seek asylum,
Right.
sending them back to dangerous situations.
Hmm.
So yeah, so he's saying that could come back.
Wow. And now there's not even like a pandemic to, justify it.
Right.
So what would they use as a justification?
Well, he thinks they might try to use, other public health concerns as a reason.
Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh?
Who knows? Wow. Okay. That's chilling just thinking about what the consequences of that would be.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And then on top of that, he's also saying that the CBP One app might go away.
Right.
So for anyone who's not familiar, like, what is that app?
Okay, so the CBP One app, it basically allows, immigrants to schedule appointments at the border
Okay.
and, present their case for asylum in a more organized way.
So it kind of brought a little bit more like order and humanity to the whole process.
Absolutely. It was a big change.
Okay. So he's saying that could get eliminated.
Potentially, yeah.
Wow. Talk about like two steps forward and then a giant leap back.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's shift gears a bit. What about work visas? I know like the America First policies were a big thing during, that last administration.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
And it seems like, those could come back, which could mean even tighter restrictions on, visas like H-1B and H-2B.
Yes.
So the H-1B, that's the one for like highly skilled workers.
Yes. So like the scientists, engineers, tech specialists,
Hmm.
the folks that companies really rely on.
Right, right. And then the H-2B is for more temporary workers, like non-agricultural, I think.
Yep. Often in like seasonal industries and things like that.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So he's predicting those are going to get a lot tougher to get.
Mm.
Could be much harder for companies to hire, people from other countries and for those people to get here.
I just start to think about like the economic impacts of all this,
Huge.
We've already got all these labor shortages in so many sectors, and these visas, they really help fill those gaps.
Yeah.
Making them even stricter. I don't know. It just seems like that could have a ripple effect on businesses, on innovation, the whole economy.
Absolutely. It could backfire in a big way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and then we've got humanitarian parole and TPS. So what is humanitarian parole?
Okay, so humanitarian parole, it's basically this special program that lets people come to the U.S. temporarily.
Okay.
But it's for, urgent humanitarian reasons.
Yeah.
So, for example, people who are fleeing war zones
Yeah.
or natural disasters or other like really dire situations.
Right.
It's kind of like a lifeline
Yeah.
for people who are really desperate,
Okay. So cutting back on that means fewer people escaping those really bad situations.
essentially, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And what about TPS?
Oh, right. So TPS stands for Temporary Protected Status.
Yeah.
And he thinks what they're going to do is just let existing TPS programs expire without renewing them.
Oh, wow.
And just to remind you, TPS is it offers temporary protection permission to work for people who are, from countries that are experiencing like armed conflict, environmental disasters, things like that.
Okay. So letting those expire means like a lot of people who have been living here, working here,
Yeah, building life.
building lives,
Mhm.
they would be at risk of being deported.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, we've covered a lot already, but we got to talk about the big one.
The big one.
Deportation and detention.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where things get really, unnerving.
It is.
So what's the word on the street? What does Julio think could change here?
Okay, so get this.
Yeah.
He's saying that deportation priorities, like, they could be completely eliminated.
Wait, what does that mean? Like, what are deportation priorities?
But right now, Immigration enforcement, they mostly focus on, people who pose a danger to public safety,
Okay.
people who have committed serious crimes, people who recently crossed the border illegally.
Okay.
So, but if they eliminate those priorities, it means anyone, anyone who's undocumented could be a target. Doesn't matter their history, doesn't matter, what they've contributed, they could be detained, deported.
Wow. That's that's a huge shift. I mean, think about the fear that that would create
Oh, massive.
for millions of people
Absolutely.
who are just trying to live their lives.
Right. He's also saying that he's hearing, whispers about like a return of those workplace raids
Yeah.
and maybe even these massive new detention centers being built in Texas.
Oh gosh, workplace raids. I remember like reading about families being torn apart, kids coming home from school and their parents are gone.
Mhm.
That's terrifying.
It is.
And these like mega detention centers, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
It just feels so inhumane.
It's a bleak picture for sure. But I do have to say, he does acknowledge that mass deportation, like logistically, it's a nightmare.
Okay.
It would take so many resources, so much coordination to actually deport, over 11 million people.
Mm.
It's just not practical on a large scale.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a silver lining, but
Yeah.
but I mean, even the possibility, even if it doesn't happen on a massive scale,
Yeah.
just that threat
Mm.
is enough to cause so much fear and anxiety. And it's not, it's not just about like whether it actually happens to you. It's
Yeah.
about living with that fear every day.
Mm-hmm. The psychological toll is huge.
Yeah. Okay. So wow, we've just like gone through a lot here.
Yeah.
Like it feels like every aspect of immigration policy could be like undergoing these huge changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a lot to process. And it's kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
It is.
So I think we need to like take a step back for a second
Yeah.
before we dive into like what all this could really mean for people.
Yeah.
I think we have to look at the big picture.
Absolutely.
And Julio, he makes this really important point about the Supreme Court and the role they could play in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
He reminds us that the current court, they have that 6-3 conservative majority, right?
Right.
And that could make it really, really difficult to challenge any of these changes in court.
Yeah, it makes things a lot more complicated.
Yep.
Because even if a lot of people are against these changes, they might not have a lot of legal options to fight them.
Wow.
No.
So that's a big factor to consider.
It is.
Okay. So we've heard what this lawyer's predictions are. We've looked at the legal landscape. But like, what does this all mean for someone who might be directly affected by this? Like, what are the real life consequences of all these changes?
Well, Julio has some pretty straightforward advice. He says, if you've been putting off any immigration applications,
Okay.
now's the time to act.
Yeah.
Like things could shift so quickly.
Yeah.
You want to be prepared.
Right.
But he also makes it clear that everyone's situation is different.
Yeah.
So, it's always a good idea to talk to an immigration lawyer, get some personalized advice before you, make any big decisions.
Absolutely. Good advice. I mean, this stuff is complicated.
It is.
And having, some expert guidance
Mhm.
is crucial. And remember, like, this is just the beginning.
Yep.
Like, this is a really fast-moving situation. Things could change at any moment.
Yeah.
So staying informed is absolutely key.
Absolutely. And, make sure you're getting your information from, reliable sources. There's so much misinformation out there,
Oh, yeah.
especially when it comes to immigration.
Yeah.
So, stick to reputable organizations,
Mhm.
legal experts,
Right.
not just random stuff you see on social media.
Yeah. That's so important. Okay, well, we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
Okay, so we just went through a lot of potential changes to immigration policy. And it's heavy stuff,
Yeah.
but it's easy to get caught up in the legal details and the policy stuff and forget that these changes, they're going to affect real people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're not just talking about, abstract rules and regulations. We're talking about like families, people's jobs, their right to try to make a better life for themselves. So we got to talk about the human impact of all of this.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get lost in the weeds,
Yeah.
the legal jargon, the political back and forth.
Right.
But we can't lose sight of the fact that there are real people behind all of this,
Mhm.
real people whose lives are going to be, affected by these changes. Like, let's take that that potential elimination of deportation priorities that we were just talking about, right?
Hmm.
It's not just about like the risk of deportation itself. It's about that fear, that uncertainty that just
Mhm.
kind of hangs over people.
Yeah, totally. Just
Yeah.
imagine, like, living with that, like, knowing that any day, you or someone you love could be taken away no matter, what you've done, what you've contributed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just the person who's, undocumented.
Oh,
It's their family, their
yeah.
friends, their community. Like kids growing up afraid that their parents are going to be taken away, businesses suffering because workers are, too scared to show up.
Yeah, it tears communities apart. And, we saw some of that impact during the last administration with those workplace raids.
Hmm.
Families were separated, kids were traumatized. It was really rough.
Yeah, it's a painful reminder of what could happen. And we can't forget about the economic side of things either.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
talked about those work visa restrictions,
Mhm.
but even beyond that, like undocumented immigrants, they play a huge role in our economy.
Oh, yeah, for
Agriculture, construction, hospitality, like so many industries that are vital.
Mhm.
And let's face it, those are often jobs that a lot of Americans just don't want to do.
That's true.
So, deporting all these workers, it could lead to these huge labor shortages. It could disrupt these industries.
Yeah,
And ultimately, it could hurt our economy as a whole.
absolutely. It's complicated. It's all connected.
Yeah. So, as we kind of like think about all these potential changes, I think it's important to like zoom out for a sec,
Yeah.
and ask ourselves like some bigger questions like what kind of society do we want to have? What are our values? And how do we want to treat people who, come here looking for safety or a better life?
Yeah, those are the big questions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this whole immigration debate, it's not just about numbers and policies.
Mm-hmm.
It's about our humanity. It's about how we treat each other. It's about how we respond to people who are in need. Are we going to turn our backs on the most vulnerable people,
Yeah.
or are we going to, embrace that idea of compassion and welcome,
Yeah.
those values that this country is supposed to be about?
That's a powerful way to put it. It really gets to the heart of it.
Yeah, it's a choice we have to make as a nation.
It is, and it's kind of a crossroads, isn't it? Like the choices we make now are going to have a ripple effect for generations to come.
Yeah.
But even in the midst of all this uncertainty and, the potential for things to get a lot worse, there's still hope. Like there are so many people out there who are fighting for a better future for immigrants, for all of us, really.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
there are people providing legal aid, offering sanctuary, raising awareness, pushing for policy changes. All of that is so important.
Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in the doom and gloom.
Yeah.
But we got to remember that there are people out there doing amazing work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that gives me hope. So let's shift gears a bit, and talk about what we can actually do. Like, what are some responses to these potential changes? What are some steps people can take if they want to get involved, if they want to help?
Yeah, let's talk solutions. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, because knowledge is power, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the more we understand about what's going on, what our options are, the more empowered we'll feel to actually do something about it.
Absolutely. And I know it can feel really overwhelming sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's so much information out there. It's like, where do you even start?
Right, right. But there are some great resources out there. Like there's the American Immigration Lawyers Association, the National Immigration Law Center, the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. All of those organizations have
Mm.
websites, tons of information, educational materials, and a lot of them offer webinars, workshops, stuff like that.
Those are great.
Yeah.
But it's not just about educating yourself. It's about doing something.
Yeah.
And one of the simplest but most effective things you can do is contact your elected officials.
Oh, yes, yes.
Let them know that this is an issue you care about, you're paying attention, and you want them to support policies that are fair and humane.
Yeah. Write letters, send emails, make phone calls, make your voice heard.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And there are so many organizations out there working on immigration issues. A lot of them rely on volunteers.
Oh, yeah.
So even if you can only spare a few hours a week,
Yeah.
it can make a huge difference. Think about your skills. What are you good at? Maybe you're good at translating or organizing events. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many ways to get involved.
Yeah, and if you're not able to donate your time, you can always donate money, to organizations that are providing services to immigrants, like legal aid groups, shelters. Even a small amount can go a long way.
It really can. And, if you can't donate money either, there are still things you can do. Spread the word about these organizations.
Yeah.
Organize a fundraiser, host a bake sale. Every little bit helps.
It all adds up. And I think it's important to remember that supporting immigrants, it's not about charity.
Mhm.
It's about solidarity.
Yes,
It's
again.
about recognizing that we're all connected and everyone deserves a chance to thrive no matter where they were born.
Beautifully said. That's what it's all about. Building bridges, not walls.
Mm,
Creating a more just and equitable world for everyone. And I think that's something that can bring people together
yeah.
across political lines.
We could definitely use a little bit more of that.
Yeah, right.
So we've talked about the potential changes, we've talked about the impact, we've talked about some ways to get involved, but I do want to acknowledge, like, this is a really heavy topic.
It is.
It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel angry, to feel sad. Those are all valid emotions.
Absolutely. You got to let yourself feel those things, let yourself process what's happening,
Yeah.
and then find ways to channel those feelings into action.
Mm-hmm. And remember, you're not alone in this. There are millions of people out there who feel the same way you do,
Yeah.
who are working towards a more just and humane immigration system.
And together,
Yeah,
we can make a difference.
we can. We have to believe that. We can't give up hope. Well, we'll be right back with some final thoughts after a quick break.
So we've really dug into a lot in this deep dive. Starting with those potential policy changes and the impact they could have on people.
We've covered, quite a range of issues here. And honestly, it's been kind of a roller coaster, like there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of potential for, hardship for people, but there's also a lot of, a lot of people fighting back, a lot of hope.
Yeah. Now, it's definitely been it's been a journey.
Yeah.
And honestly, we've only scratched the surface here.
Right.
I mean, this issue is so complex. There's so much more we could talk about.
Yeah.
So many different perspectives to consider.
Absolutely. And we definitely encourage you to, keep learning about it, do your own research, form your own opinions.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up, I want to zoom out for a minute
Yeah.
and think about the big picture because, immigration, it's always been this defining part of American history and
Right.
and our identity as a nation. It's woven into who we are.
It is,
Yeah.
from the very beginning, with European colonization to, all those waves of immigrants in the 19th and 20th centuries, our country has been shaped by people from all over the world.
Yeah, and throughout history, we've seen these periods of welcoming immigrants with open arms, and then, these periods of shutting people out of fear and restriction. There have been times when immigrants were seen as essential, vital contributors to our society, and then there were times when they were, blamed for everything, scapegoated, demonized.
It's a fascinating history, but also a very contradictory one.
Yeah.
But I think one thing is clear, this whole debate about immigration, it's not new. It's been going on forever,
Right.
and it's still shaping our country today.
Yeah. And it feels like we're at this turning point again
Yeah.
where, things could go in a lot of different directions and the stakes are really high.
Oh, absolutely. The decisions we make now, they're going to have a huge impact on so many people's lives.
Yeah.
Not just, immigrants themselves, but all of us.
Mm.
It's about what kind of society we want to live in, what we value, what kind of legacy we leave behind.
So as we kind of come to the end of this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with this question.
Okay.
Given everything we've talked about, what role do you want to play in shaping the future of immigration in this country? It's a question worth thinking about.
It is. Are you going to sit this one out, or are you going to try to do something to make a difference, to create a more just and humane immigration system?
And remember, you don't have to be a lawyer or a policy expert
No, not at all.
to make a difference.
Every little bit counts.
Yeah, every act of kindness, every voice that speaks up for compassion, for understanding, it all contributes to a more welcoming and inclusive society. So stay informed, stay engaged, and let your values be your guide.
Yeah.
The future of immigration, it's not set in stone. It's something that we create together. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.